Today, we're gonna make some awesome recycled paper. At Manual, we minimize paper use, but it's unavoidable. When shooting, let's see, we carry the script in our pocket. Sometimes we need to list materials to buy, and while many tasks can be done by phone, not all can. And then we end up with a lot of leftover paper that we keep as scrap paper. It would be cooler to do something decent with it, right? 12 years ago, we made very basic recycled paper on Manual do Mundo. So today, we're gonna try to do it better. Try to get a little more creative with recycled paper to make something beautiful. This video is one of 8 projects launching our platform, Manual Maker. Look, we've already made a folding table, an irrigable garden, a polyvinyl chloride trailer for a bicycle, how to recycle PLA. And this platform is collaborative. You can include any project you created at school, at home, or inspired by others. So if you want to invent something new with recycled paper based on today's lesson, that's great, add it there. So today's project, for example, is already on the website with all the instructions, photos, material lists, everything complete, okay? Let's start making our paper. You will basically need 3 things. Old paper that you want to recycle. We're going to use printer paper here, silkscreen frames, you can buy these ready-made online, and a blender. Basically, what we have to do is to dissolve the paper fibers in water. The paper has to break down. So the first step is to put the paper in water and let it soak. We tested this method 3 ways to show you. Check it out, it's cool. A week ago, we separated 3 boxes and poured water in them. In the first one, we put regular paper without doing anything to it. It's the laziest way. In the other box, we put hand-torn paper. It wasn't torn into very small pieces, just basic pieces-ish. And in the third box, we put paper that had already gone through a shredder, so it's in really thin strips. Look at the result here, 7 days later. The whole paper is still intact, but it's really easy to tear. See, it falls apart in your hand. The shredded one pretty much disintegrated. There are still some pieces here, but it's a big mess. The paper shredded by the machine still has that shredded shape from the machine, but if we stir it a bit, give it a shake, it'll turn into a mess too. It's really easy to handle. If I were gonna make papier-mâché, which is that paper pulp we use to make masks, for example, the perfect paper ball was made like this. Look, this is papier-mâché made from toilet paper, which is exactly what we just did. But then you take this paper pulp, dry it a little and mix it with white glue. You'll have a dough you can work with. If I were making papier-mâché, these 2 shredding methods are better since you get a nice pulp. But here, with recycled paper, we're going to have to blend it in the blender. So this lazy way of just dropping the whole paper in here might be the best, because it's much easier to tear it once it's already wet. See, I'm tearing pieces, I don't know, from 20 sheets here or even more, and it comes apart really easily. And then we can put it in the blender, a little bit shredded, because I can't just throw this in the blender hole, otherwise it'll get stuck. But look, it's really easy to cut. So let's move on to the second phase, blending this in the blender. I'm going to use the laziest way, which is this paper that hasn't been cut. You don't need to put in too much, okay? The idea is to use plenty of water, okay? Otherwise you'll break the blender and then I can't be held responsible. Don't add too much water or it will leak. I think this is fine. It's still too thick. You need to let the blender get up to speed or it won't break up and separate the paper fibers properly. Now that's it. If you look here, you won't see pieces of paper anymore, just small clumps, which are the blended cellulose. It looks like porridge. Now I'm going to need a slightly bigger basin because it has to be big enough to fit the silkscreen frame inside it. See, this one works well. So let's go. Let's pour the mush in there. And add water until it's enough to cover the screen well. The screen has to be able to submerge in this mush here. I don't think it's enough yet. Let's run a test. Look, that's cool. There's a layer, a film of paper on top of the screen. This still isn't good, right? It hasn't caught here yet. Probably due to insufficient water, so we need to add more. One very important thing here. The more cellulose I put in this water, the thicker the paper will be in the end. So that's what decides the paper thickness you want, right? Maybe you want a really thick paper, but the downside is that it gets kind of fluffy, so it's not good to make paper too thick? Let's test it here. It's almost coming out. Look at that. When I pull it, I can't leave these defects here. Okay. Now it came out well. Look, there are some small bumps, but the paper has no tears. Oops, now there are some tears, right? Because I hit it, it starts to get ruined. You have to be careful after you do it. But anyway, from what I can tell, you have to take it off kind of quickly, see? When you take it quickly, it turns out better. The main thing now is to let this dry here for about 2 days. In the end, you'll just have a piece of paper, but we saved you from waiting that long. We did this 2 days ago, and the paper is already dry. If I tap it from the back a few times, it already To be honest with you guys, we did a lot of tests this week, so I have a lot of recycled paper sheets here. One important thing you'll notice is that the side facing the mesh here gets really smooth. One side becomes very smooth, while the other remains rougher, showing the texture typical of homemade recycled paper. But this is just the basics. We already had this result about 12 years ago. The question is, what can we improve? Is there an easier way to do it, or a way that looks better in the end? One thing we tried is to put this wet dough on top of cloth, and then you can use the mesh one more time. Let's test it, right? Look, I'm going to put the cloth here on the table, nice and straight, and turn the paper towards it. Let's try to remove this excess water with a sponge. Another advantage is that the paper will dry much faster. The thing is, when I pull it now, the paper has to stay on the cloth, not on the screen. I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe it's not dry enough here yet. If I dry it a bit more, it should come off the screen. Oh, ouch! Oh. Close. Yeah, I'm not really believing in this method, no. I think our screen is too thin for this. I'm going to do an experiment with tool here to see if it can't pick up some of the cellulose. I think it'll come off much easier.
That's what we need.
By an incredible coincidence, this morning I walked down the street and saw that a neighbor had left some easels leaning against a pole. I asked, and he said I could take them. So let's take this thing apart to make little frames and create a kind of canvas. But this time it won't be for silkscreen. We're going to use that tool, which I think is still too thick, but I think the result on the fabric is really interesting. Do you think people have your miter saw and pneumatic hammer, those kinds of things at home? You don't need all that, right? Just use an old picture frame and staple the mesh on with a regular stapler. One cool thing I wanted to try is an empty frame on top, so we can pile up more paper on the mesh. The paper will get stuck here, it won't slide to the sides, and we can take out a slightly larger amount. The advantage is also that there won't be paper piling up on top of the mesh, especially where it's over the wood, which is hard to remove later. Let's see. This became really easy. Look at the paper here. But now we would have to let this dry for a while and then remove the paper from the cloth. I think there's a very thin layer of paper on top here, and this mesh is too thick, it lets too much through. Everything moves quickly here, so Danny already bought a thinner tool. I'll use a double layer. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I wanted to hold the paper well. I don't know if the difference is clear, but here it's much narrower than here. And let's add another load of cellulose so the mixture gets thicker. I think it's getting too thin. The experiment was different this time. Maybe we'll get a much thicker paper. 1, 2, 3, and oof. I think this is gonna work, huh? I'll pull it out slowly so it doesn't tear. Paper of the finest quality. Let's improvise a clothesline back here and hang this beauty up to dry. I'm happy because we developed a method that's very different from the video 12 years ago. Now I can reuse the same net as much as I want. I just need multiple pieces of cloth. But one thing that bothers me is the color of that paper. I think it's really gray. It looks like the toilet paper we had when I was a kid. So I'm gonna try to beat up some of the cardboard, so that we also got from the neighbor. It was supposed to soak in water for a week, but it didn't. That's why this blender can't handle it. I'm gonna get a stronger blender, but if you're gonna try to do it at home, 1 week will solve the problem. Looking at the water here, it seems like it's already got a friendlier color. Let's run the test. I'm going to try to make a sheet with a slightly thinner layer now, because I thought that one was too thick. When we start being able to repeat the result, it's because the method is working. One color has nothing to do with the other anymore. Now it's time for fun. Let's test all kinds of crazy things. I wanted to change the paper color without using anything artificial. So the first thing I'm going to try is turmeric paint. It has a very yellowish tone. It's really beautiful. And look how cool, a completely different color from what we made before. I'm going to make two, because I'm thinking we can do a chemistry experiment with this. Turmeric turns red with baking soda. I tried to add it, but it didn't turn red. So let's try to make the red another way with annatto, which is that spice that comes from a plant called urucum. That's what several indigenous peoples used to paint themselves red. And look, it turned out a cute salmon color. Finally, let's try making seed paper. I'm going to attempt a crazy idea. First goes a layer of the reddish paper with turmeric. Then I add the seeds, which in this case are sesame seeds, and on top goes a layer of paper made from cardboard. The cool thing is that we'll have a two-colored paper with the seeds in the middle, kind of like a sandwich. For the second, I'll do the same with margarita, testing the yellow paper. And for the third one, I'll try a different technique, which is a layer of turmeric paper on the bottom. Then I sprinkle the seeds on top and put it in the basin with cardboard. And as you may have noticed, everything went wrong. Let's try to finish this paper, but I'm not sure it'll turn out well. Just for the colorful clothesline and the effort, I think it deserves a thumbs up down there, doesn't it? I'll see you when this dries. The paper hasn't dried yet, but it's already coming off the cloth. One of them fell here. It's better if we separate it and put it somewhere else to dry. Look how nice it comes off really easily. 3 days later, and we have the result. These are the first ones we made, which is the paper on the silkscreen frame. It has a really nice texture, super thin, but I think that at the same time, the sheet of paper is also thinner. So it kind of looks like toilet paper, which I'm not really a fan of. On the papers where we use the mesh with bigger holes and with cloth, the result is completely different. The texture is much rougher, so it becomes a more rustic paper, and it's also much thicker. It has a higher grammage. In other words, its weight per area is much greater. This one is made with regular sulfite paper pulp. Adding some cardboard improved the color, making it look more like recycled, more brownish paper. Then with turmeric, it gets a really nice yellow. It's a light yellow. All of this can be mixed together, right? In the brown here, to darken it, we made two with turmeric. This one fell and got dirty. We'll test it soon. And there's this one with annatto, which gives it a reddish tone. The downside is that annatto contains many small grains, so touching it causes some to come off. I think it would be worth boiling the annatto and straining it before using it, because this makes your hands kind of reddish and it ends up staining all the other sheets of paper. But what really surprised me was the seed paper. That's how we came up with it there. I don't know, maybe that's how it's supposed to be done, but I've never seen it anywhere, you know. Putting one sheet on top of the other and ending up making it colorful, it worked really well. So you can see on one side here, there's annatto, on the other side cardboard, here turmeric with annatto. The seeds were really well wrapped. I was afraid they would sprout because of the moisture in the paper, but there wasn't enough time. The paper dried faster than that. And then there's the last sheet that didn't work. I put the seed on top of the paper in the other bowl, but it sort of worked. The seed is still here. The downside is that it's visible, so I think it's not so well protected. It comes loose, right? If you run your finger over it, the seed might come off. But anyway, it still works as seed paper, but what I'm curious to test now is to see if the printer accepts this paper. I'll trim and cut the paper's edges to make it look more presentable. You start to appreciate it a little more, the sheets we made here. One interesting thing is that you can see the thickness of the paper turned out quite different between the sheets. That's what I mentioned at the beginning, about how much pulp you use when picking up the cellulose with the screen. One thing I almost forgot to do is test if the paper with turmeric turns red when we put water with baking soda on it. It didn't work when I tried it. It didn't turn red. I wanted to make a paper that was already reddish. I wanted it to be a real blood red, which is what you get when you mix a lot of turmeric with baking soda. I think here, since the turmeric was really diluted in the water, it gave a kind of weak effect, which I didn't really like. I came up with a kind of wedding invitation here, and my question is whether this will look good on the printer. First, the paper isn't the size of an A4, right? It's not what the printer is used to printing. Second, it's wavy and thicker too. I don't know if it will move smoothly inside, but let's give it a try. Couldn't it pull it in? I'll put more papers underneath to lift it, since it can't pull the paper. Danny had already told me that this could happen, and this printer has a way to feed from the back here if the paper is thicker. When you print something, you can see the difference. It looks so nice when you print on recycled paper. Really cool. I'm not going to show it yet, so let's try printing on seed paper. I think it's harder to print on seed paper because it has more texture, but let's try. Let's try it. It printed! Hey, how nice. Let's make the invitation with seed paper. I think this seed paper idea is really cool because you don't keep that thing in your house forever. The paper you don't know what to do with, or that invitation you need to store somewhere. Just to note the progress from 12 years ago. We made a paper on a screen much simpler than the silk screen one, which you can buy at any fabric or tool shop. We used a method that lets you make multiple sheets with one screen, and we put seeds inside the paper. It has a different color on each side using natural dyes, and we were able to print perfectly on top of it. The worst part is the extra letter G. Invite you to G, give it a like. If this were a real wedding invitation, it would be a disaster. But considering this is a video about making recycled paper, I think if this isn't worth a like, I don't know what is.